Good evening. Welcome to the Glazov Gang. Tonight, a very special episode with a very special guest, backed by popular demand, Daniel Greenfield, a Shillman journalism fellow at the David Horowitz Freedom Center. He writes the best blog on the internet, The Point, at the Freedom Center's website magazine, frontpagemag.com. Daniel Greenfield, welcome back to the Glazov Gang.
Thank you. Backed by popular demand. That's saying a lot.
Thank you, Daniel. We have so much to discuss. I love all your blogs. All our readers love your blogs so much at Front Page. Let's begin with a few of your articles just in the last few days. So much going on. I want to title this episode, Obama Lied, Americans in Afghanistan Died. And you wrote about that in the context also of what was going on with Bergdahl and that whole prison swap. First, before we get to the lies about Afghanistan, let's just start a little bit with the prison swap. Your thoughts on that?
I think it's entirely predictable. Obama's doing everything possible to shut down Gitmo. That was why he went after Osama bin Laden. He admitted that he was trying to capture Osama bin Laden, not kill him. He's been doing a victory dance over the killing of bin Laden, but he was out to capture him and put him on trial in a civilian court to shut down the military courts, shut down Gitmo, and bring all the al-Qaeda terrorists into the United States. Now, he failed. He won an election, but he failed to accomplish the Gitmo shutdown. So this is Act 2. I mean, the Pentagon sources said that there were options offered, there were rescue options offered. Obama specifically went with the trade because he wanted to shut down Gitmo.
Daniel, what's going on in your view in terms of the father at that Rose Garden ceremony and all that talk in Arabic and what he was saying?
You know, there are sometimes soldiers who go native. This is one of the unusual cases where it seems like the father of one of the soldiers went native.
Daniel, you ended up, after this whole mess, writing an article, Obama Lied, Americans in Afghanistan Died, for Front Page Magazine. Fascinating article. And, you know, you wrote about many things here, but overall, the administration has been saying that the Taliban are not our enemy. But if the Taliban are not our enemy, then why did Obama send troops to Afghanistan that fought and died against the enemy?
The interesting thing about Obama's speech at the West Point commencement speech was that he never once mentioned the Taliban. Now, this was a speech that was supposed to discuss winding down Afghanistan, and there's no mention of the enemy the United States has been fighting, that troops under him have been fighting for 6 years, which is a really very strange omission, unless he doesn't think that the Taliban are the enemy. And, you know, we have quotes from him, we have quotes from Biden, we have quotes from people in the administration indicating that they don't think the Taliban are the enemy. So the end game here was not to defeat the Taliban. The end game here was to find terms on which to bring the Taliban into the Afghan government, to pressure the Taliban using military force and to pressure the Afghan government using a timeline for the withdrawal of forces. There have been critics who have said that Obama's timeline for the withdrawal of forces undermined the surge, but it was actually the whole point of the surge. The surge was to pressure the Taliban. The timeline was to tell the Afghan government that we're going to withdraw by this and this point, and you have to reach a deal with the Taliban by that point, or you're on your own. This is what he did in Iraq, and we're seeing the disaster right now.
You know, this is just one disaster after another. Quote, Daniel Greenfield in that article, Obama Lied, Americans in Afghanistan Died. Again, quote, Obama did not recommit to Afghanistan to defeat al-Qaeda, as he has claimed, but to engage the Taliban. The Bergdahl deal was a last-ditch effort to revive a Taliban peace process that Obama believes will finally disprove the Bush approach to terrorism. I mean, this is a vicious circle of a comedy of errors. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Obama's approach to the war on terror was to shut it down as much as possible. He's done it in an awkward way. He's done it in a runaround. He's done it by sacrificing 1,600 American lives. But the big picture is that it was always meant to shut the war down. Now, people have focused on the drone attacks, and they've taken it to assume that Obama is behind the war on terror. He is for it. And he's not. The drone strikes are one part of a strategy. That strategy is to walk away from actual confrontations, to take out these so-called extremists and bring the others over into the political sphere the way that the Muslim Brotherhood did. This was what was done in Libya with completely disastrous results.
Daniel, another quote, "This perverse duality characterizes his entire approach to the war on terror. A military tactic is joined to an anti-war aim. Force is used to prove that violence doesn't work nearly as well as diplomacy and appeasement." I mean, this is just crazy. So these are anti-war people that are using war to prove their anti-war goals? How does this work? Tell us about this pathology.
Well, obviously it doesn't work, but in terms of thinking, this is what they've been trying to accomplish. What they've been trying to do is to they've used the 1,600 American soldiers who have died to try and pressure the Afghanistan into a peace process. Obviously, that hasn't worked very badly. They've taken the idea that we can't win wars, we can't defeat the Taliban, we can't defeat Al-Qaeda, we can't defeat our enemies. All we can do is use force to win them over and to reduce the number of extremists who refuse to negotiate, and the other 95% of moderate Taliban that Biden described, that I wrote about in the article, will come around.
You know, Daniel, it's very interesting how the media, the press, always discuss the body bags, the dead American soldiers in a war. Perhaps that they should, of course. We care for every life that is lost. But why? Where are the voices? Where are the protests? Where is the discussion of the Americans that died in Afghanistan under Obama? And if I'm correct, more Americans have died under Obama than under Bush. Am I correct?
Yes, and we're not talking about anything at all. The Ted Koppel, the famous Ted Koppel reading names thing that he did from Iraq, it's not happening now. It's not going to happen at all. We have a very limited amount of coverage. The New York Times was doing a lot of coverage of Iraq veterans who died, who came back wounded. They did all these flashy, in-depth stories, these human interest pieces. They're doing these stories very rarely now. They're mainly focusing on the occasional suicide, and that's for another political agenda.
So Daniel Greenfield, under Obama, the way things are going, we are going to lose Afghanistan to the enemy, correct?
Well, we've already lost it, really. I mean, the question is on what terms we're going to lose it. The idea was that we were not going to defeat the Taliban. We were going to create this kind of environment in which the Taliban would be able to come into the government. We were not out to defeat them, which means obviously we didn't defeat them.
Imagine during World War II where we're coming to some kind of agreement where the Nazis are going to be part of some kind of government and there will be peace. This is just absolutely crazy. Daniel Greenfield, we're losing in Afghanistan. Or as you said, we've already lost, but on what terms remains to be decided. Al-Qaeda apparently is on the run, as Obama has been saying about Iraq. But now we know, as news reports have told us in the last few days, Al-Qaeda has seized Mosul, which is Iraq's second largest or third largest city, and Tikrit. Now Iraq is being taken over by Al-Qaeda, but Al-Qaeda is supposed to be on the run. Your thoughts?
Well, first of all, this comes directly out of the Arab Spring. It comes directly from that. Secondly, it comes from Obama's abandonment of Iraq. He had no strategy for the withdrawal. And this tells us what is going to happen in Afghanistan. We can see what's happened in Iraq because he just walked away and patted himself on the back and said, mission accomplished. This is going to recur now in Afghanistan. But the bigger picture is that Obama has been telling two major lies about Al-Qaeda. The first lie is that it's on the path to defeat. Now, to tell that lie, he had to focus in on the supposed Al-Qaeda core, the Al-Qaeda leadership, which stopped being relevant a while back. Bush already defeated that Al-Qaeda. Obama is taking credit for defeating a form of Al-Qaeda that Bush had already defeated. And he went into Afghanistan, supposedly, and focused on this war, the Afghan surge and everything else, in order to defeat an enemy that was no longer actually in Afghanistan. The CIA told Obama that there were around 100 Al-Qaeda fighters in Afghanistan. So this conflict was already over. Bush had already won that conflict. Now, the second lie was that Al-Qaeda was actually moving into its next phase. Al-Qaeda, like a lot of terrorist and guerrilla groups, operates in three phases. The first phase is that you have a base, which is the meaning of Al-Qaeda. That's the core group that is going in to carry out large-scale attacks. The second phase is that you have smaller franchises popping up. The actual core group no longer matters. You have multiple smaller groups that become larger and larger as they take power. Now, the third phase of that is that they actually take over entire territories and run those territories and become effectively countries. Now, we're in the second phase of Al-Qaeda, and this is the phase that the media and Obama deliberately ignored. This is what is actually happening in the Middle East. Al-Qaeda has developed very large franchises. The various Al-Qaeda variations of Al-Qaeda in Iraq have something like 30,000 fighters. That's much bigger than Al-Qaeda ever was in the past.
Daniel, the way things are going under Obama, Iraq has been lost?
Iraq is back in the middle of a very dangerous civil war. I don't think that Al-Qaeda will take Iraq, but it's not inconceivable that they could form a territory, a sort of statelet, out of parts of Iraq and Syria, in which case Al-Qaeda under Obama will actually have its own country.
Daniel Greenfield, in terms of these terrorists in Iraq, in terms of Al-Qaeda in Iraq, where are they getting their weapons from?
One obvious source is Libya. Gaddafi was very big on stockpiling weapons. Obama backed the overthrow of Gaddafi by Al-Qaeda-linked groups that supposedly the Muslim Brotherhood pacified and made nonviolent and political. These groups were obviously aligned with Al-Qaeda. We found that out the hard way in Benghazi, and they liberated a whole lot of weapons from those stockpiles, and those weapons went all over the place. Secondly, they're getting weapons from Qatar, which is the Islamist tyranny that currently was responsible for the so-called Burgdal swap. They've had close ties to Al-Qaeda. They had ties to the mastermind of September 11th. They had ties to the Taliban, for that matter. And, for example, now we're seeing allegations that some of their weapons, that Stinger missiles used against a U.S. chopper, came from there. And they've been supplying Al-Qaeda and every Islamic terrorist group in a very big way. The New York Times actually briefly discussed this in a sort of plausible deniability sort of way, saying that Obama administration told the military to turn a blind eye to their weapon smuggling to Libyan rebels because, we couldn't do anything to stop them anyway. That was the claim then. But they admitted that they were backing very dangerous people. And, now we're getting a sense of how dangerous those people really are.
Daniel Greenfield, let me get this straight. Al-Qaeda is armed and getting all these weapons thanks to Obama.
Absolutely. If you look at what happened in Libya, those are the two flanks, those are the two ways they got weapons. First, from Arab states, Gulf states that were interested in helping overthrow Gaddafi, and the second location is from Gaddafi himself.
Daniel, as I look at the subjects I want to discuss with you, I don't know if I want to laugh or cry because it's every single thing we discuss in terms of foreign policy under Obama, it appears as though the enemy is in the White House because everything I want to discuss with you. So the Rose Garden ceremony with Bergdahl, the prisoner swap, now what's happening in Afghanistan, what's happening in Iraq. Now let's get to the Benghazi attack. Today or yesterday we just found out that U.S. intelligence knew in real time, this is your blog, that the Benghazi attack was terrorism because of intercepted phone calls that were using State Department cell phones. Tell our viewers quickly about this.
Well, apparently, we already knew that the U.S. intelligence knew from the beginning that this was terrorism, but now we know how early they knew. They knew while the attack was going on. Our intelligence is actually pretty good. Despite the clown show that Obama and Rice put on, they knew from the very moment that what was going on here was a terrorist attack. When Hillary talked about how there was this ambiguity, they thought it might have been terrorism. They thought it might not have been terrorism, it might have been a protest over a video. They were angry over YouTube. That was all nonsense. They knew in real time what was going on. If the U.S. intelligence knew it, then Obama knew it, then Rice knew it, because that was their position. They had to have been briefed.
So they lied.
They absolutely lied, and they knew that they were lying. And they've gone on lying since then.
I've got some great news, though, because we can all be comforted, because Hillary Clinton has told us there is no need to worry about the Taliban commanders that were just released, because they're not going to really hurt any Americans. They're not a threat to Americans.
And I bet she told Ambassador Stevens that he doesn't have to worry about Anshar Sharia. They're just a bunch of pussycats.
Why would somebody...
rocket-propelled grenades.
Why would Hillary Clinton say something that moronic and stupid?
Because she's basically a moronic and stupid politician who has been inflated well beyond her ability. She's actually a pretty terrible campaigner, and when the first moment you ask her a serious question, she falls apart, which is what she proved in this gaffe-prone book release, which has gone about as badly as it could possibly go.
But Daniel Greenfield, do you have any compassion in your heart? Because recently, Hillary said that they almost were broke after leaving the White House.
Yeah, they were tragically broke millionaires with an $8 million book deal. And like most broke people, they went and bought an 11-room mansion. They went and bought a 5-room mansion in Washington, D.C. They were actually bankrupt. They had only 2 houses. It's tragic.
Why did she say that?
Because in her deluded way, she thinks she's relating to ordinary people. It's the genuine scanner moment, which the media faked with Bush 1, but in her case, it's real. She thinks that having an $8 million book deal means that she knows what suffering is.
Daniel Greenfield, we have under a minute left. When you go to sleep these evenings, what is primarily on your mind in terms of the world situation?
What's primarily on my mind is that the future looks very grim, but it doesn't have to look grim. That the biggest defense that we have is our knowledge of what is really going on.
Do you have hope?
I absolutely have hope, because as long as there are good people out there, there's reason to have hope.
Daniel Greenfield, thank you so much for being a part of the David Horowitz Freedom Center, for writing your wonderful blog, The Point, that I read regularly and religiously every day. You're doing a fantastic job. Thanks for being such a noble and brave truth teller in our world today.
It's a privilege to work with such amazing people.
Thank you, Daniel, and we hope you'll be back on the Glazov Gang. And join us next week on the Glazov Gang. Good night.